Welcome to our 5th episode of Reading and Recovery with Jan and Robin. Today we're going to visit with Ray Wylie Hubbard. And before we do that, I want to introduce Candace Stovall from Recovery Resource. She's one of the development associates, and she is going to tell you a little bit about an upcoming event they have.
Thank you both so much for inviting me to join you all today. We are super excited about this year's Stars in Recovery event. The event will take place on April 15th in Fort Worth with keynote speaker and guest of today's show, Ray Wylie Hubbard. We have virtual tickets available for $100 that will give you access to a live feed of the event. So if you're not comfortable being around groups just yet, this is a great option for you to watch from home or your office. And then we have sponsorships that include live tickets, virtual tickets, and we'll even give you access to a VIP reception that takes place right before the event on the 15th. Proceeds from the event benefit Recovery Resource Council, which this year we are celebrating our 75th anniversary. We provide services to 20 counties in North Texas. We serve our veterans and families. We have programs and services for individuals seeking help for substance misuse and addiction. And we also have programs for the youth in North Texas that may be more susceptible to drug and alcohol use. Of course, none of this is possible without the help from our community. So to purchase your tickets, you can visit the link in the description box or visit recoverycouncil.org for more information. We hope that we will see you the day of the event. Back to you, girls.
Thank you, Candace. We're really excited about the upcoming event. So I'd like to introduce to you Ray Wylie Hubbard. Let me tell you about him. Ray Wylie Hubbard was born in the town of Soper, Oklahoma, but his family moved to Oak Cliff in southwest Dallas in 1954. He attended high school and graduated in 1965. After graduating from high school, he enrolled in North Texas State University, that is now University of North Texas, as an English major, and he spent the summers in Red River, New Mexico, playing folk music in a trio known as Three Faces West. During this time, he wrote the song Up Against the Wall, Redneck Mother, first made famous by Jerry Jeff Walker. Then he assembled a group of friends and a band and signed with Warner Brothers, and the local band was called Ray Wylie Hubbard and the Cowboy Twinkies. Over the decades, Hubbard has signed recorded albums for various other labels. But to most, Ray Wylie Hubbard is a longtime cult figure among fans of outlaw country and the gritty side of Americana. He's a singer-songwriter specializing in hard-edged character studies and rough-hewn, compassionate meditations on life and relationships. We are so honored to introduce our friend and fellow Texan, Ray Wylie Hubbard.
Oh.
Hey, how are you?
I am doing really well after that introduction. I can hardly wait to hear me.
Oh, well, thank you. We really appreciate you being with us today. And so we have several questions to ask you, but we do want to start with the question, okay, how did you come up with the song Up Against the Wall, Redneck Mother?
Well, back in, I guess, right out of high school, myself, Wayne Kidd, and Rick Fowler, we were in a little folk group. We went to Red River, New Mexico, and started playing in a little barbecue joint at night. And then we really liked Red River, so we kept going up there, and we opened a little club up there called the Outpost. All these musicians from Austin going to Colorado would stop off, guys like Jerry Jeff Walker and Michael Murphy and B.W. Stevenson. And then after our little club would close, we would have these, jam sessions. And when I were at this jam session, it was my turn to go get the beer. So there were two bars in Red River, New Mexico. Down at the far end of the street was the kind of safe, long-haired hippie musician bar, and right across the street from the Hootenanny was the hardcore, serious cowboy, hillbilly, redneck country bar, which, you know, should have been the name of it. But and so I went in there, you know, and there it was about 40 of these old boys and one woman, and I walked in there, and all of a sudden Merle Haggard's The Fight Beside of Me just stopped, and everybody looked at me, and I walked up there and said, "I'd like a case of beer." And it kind of got a little testy in there, and I came out, and there was a pickup truck with a gun rack, Oklahoma plates, and a bumper sticker said, "Goat ropers need love too." And I went back to the Hootenanny, and I said, "I almost got beat up getting you guys some beer." And a guy by the name of B.W. Stevenson said, "Well, did you get the beer?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, here, sing a song." So I went, "He was born in Oklahoma," you know, and wrote it, kind of made it up. And it was just kind of a anti anthem to, you know, Fight Inside of Me and Okie from Muskogee at the time. And so it was just kind of a, you know, it was just a joke. Who would have thought it would have legs all this time? But well, it just, and you know, that's the thing about songwriting. I talk about songwriting is inspiration plus craft, and the inspiration, you just never know where that's going to come from. So that's how that thing happened.
I love it. Well, I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, so I'm very familiar with the song, and you know, I think it played at every party I was at. But we want to go back to where your addiction and trouble with alcohol first started. And you say in your book you were at the iconic Kip's Big Boy at Northwest Highway in Hillcrest, and somebody handed you Miller High Life in 11th grade. And do you remember how that made you feel when you smelled it and took the first sip of it?
Yeah, there was, like I said, a bunch of guys were hanging around there and at the Kip's Big Boy there, and all of a sudden I kind of pulled in. You know, like I say, I moved from Oklahoma, and it was just like I was just this farm kid. I mean, when I moved, I was barefoot and wore overalls, and so I never fit in. I never just all through the 4th, 5th, and I guess 8th, 10th grade, I just really never had any friends. I was just kind of a loner. And so anyhow, I saw these guys there, so I pulled in there. They were sitting there, and a guy handed me a Miller High Life, and I opened it and took a drink, and all of a sudden I was a part of, you know, I belonged, and all of a sudden it changed the way I felt about me and about the world. And then I just kind of went, and all of a sudden it was like I was in control, you know, and felt a part of. So anyhow, that was kind of how the first one affected me right away.
Well, thank you. We enjoyed reading that part of the story and realizing how it happened so young.
Because also, if you're not an alcoholic, you don't remember how that first drink made you feel. You know, those of us that are totally remember that.
Well, it you know, it was as I say, it's very it had quite an effect on me. You know, it was like, say, all of a sudden I kind of felt normal. I felt in control. I felt assured of myself. And before I was just kind of, you know, wasn't that happy.
Okay. One of the things you said in your book that one day you were sitting across from Stevie Ray in BC, and you had detoxed for about 24 hours. You'd been without a rail of Coke, and you looked at him and you said, "This is intense." At the same time, Stevie Ray and BC both replied, "There ain't no elevators. You got to take the steps." Could you explain what they meant by that statement?
Yeah, it's like when they came, I guess, you know, did the 12-step call on me, and I kind of remember some other things in there too. As I was kind of sitting there, and Stevie Ray said, "You want to quit drinking?" I went, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Well, the first thing you do is you quit drinking." I went, "Well, if I could quit drinking, I'd quit drinking, but I can't quit drinking." He said, "You want to quit, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, first you quit drinking." And I went, "Ah." And he said, "You quit drinking, and then you get into recovery, and you work these 12 steps, and then you recover from this hopeless state of mind and body, because that's what I later on found what alcoholism was. It's the mental obsession with a physical allergy. And all of a sudden, so, I'm saying, what, I said, what happens to me, 4 months, what happens when you get sober? Because at the time, it was a terrifying thought, because alcohol had always done so much for me, had always been there for me, and did remarkable things for a long period of time. And it was fun. And, but now it wasn't fun. It was dangerous. And so I said, what happens down there? And Stevie Ray said, well, he said, once he got sober after about 4 or 5 months, it's like he took off the boxing gloves and he could play guitar. And I said, no, man, you could play guitar before. And he says, no, man, there was always something between me and that guitar. And he said, once the alcohol and drugs went away, he said, there was nothing. He said, that was just an incredible, beautiful thing. And so that gave me hope. Gave me hope to say, I'll try this thing, but I'll see I'll work the steps to see what happens.
Did you have that same feeling after you rid yourself of alcohol? Did you have any of the same feelings where it felt different?
Yeah, well, the thing is all of a sudden it's like this creative spark that I think is within everybody. I like to think of it as a divine creative spark. With that creative spark, I actually became a real songwriter, and I had, I was able to remove my fear and doubt, and learn the craft of songwriting, and take that inspiration, and actually, have a pretty good career because of it. I've heard before, like, that, I lost everything because I wouldn't give up one thing. And then I came in and I worked those steps and I gave up one thing and I got everything.
I love that quote. Well,
I can't remember where I heard that, somewhere, probably some meeting. It was not, I haven't had an original thought since I got sober.
Well, talking about the steps, like I remember when I came into the doors of AA, I knew I had a problem, and that first step wasn't hard. And the second step, my parents were both in AA, so I knew that I could take that step. But the third step, I just thought, if I take that and turn my will over to God, as I understood him, he wasn't going to want me to have fun anymore. And I had trouble taking that step, and you seem to have trouble also. Would you share what it was like taking the first 3 steps?
Yeah, well, the first step, when admitted we were powerless of alcohol, life had become unmanageable. I mean, it's pretty much, I remember someone says, I was at a meeting sometime early on, they said, you have to hit your bottom in order to, really appreciate the recovery. And to be able to do it. And I said, well, how do I know if I hit my bottom? I still got a job. The guy said, look around you. Where are you? A meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, this is the bottom. I mean, there's alcoholic death, but, you don't really want to count that. So, this is pretty much, the very best thinking, the very best I could do with my life. I ended up in AA, which is, pretty sad if you really think about it. But so I came in, and all of a sudden, so the first step was pretty much a given. Alcohol and my life unmanageable got me into AA. And the second step, like I say, I don't know, somewhere in there, I think in high school or something, when I grew up as a kid, I went to all these pretty whooping and hollering churches, and they were terrifying. They were scary as a kid, and so, I kind of just didn't really think about it after we moved to Dallas. And then somewhere in there, I heard that in high school, I heard the word agnostic. And they said, agnostic, what's that? And they said, well, that's someone who doesn't know if they're a God. And all of a sudden I went, yeah, I'll be an agnostic. So the second step for me is I was a pretty militant agnostic, to tell you the truth, though. I just didn't care for I had no idea there was a difference between religion and spirituality at the time. But the second step, I saw a bunch of these people in this meeting, and I knew they drank and did drugs like I did, and they weren't drinking and doing drugs, so that was a power greater than me right off the bat. And then I figured if I hung around long enough, they could restore me to sound thinking as far as alcohol was concerned. So that was, for me, I came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Was these drunks in AA who weren't drinking could get me to realize the insanity of the first drink, could get my mind right about whiskey. But then the second step to the third step was like the Grand Canyon. I mean, how, the decision to turn my will and life over the care of God as we understood him. That was because someone like me, so anyhow, I got an old guy I was running with there that sponsored him. We went round and round about that third step, because I said, man, I saw the whooping and hollering in churches. I saw the, thing going on. I said, if I, turn my will and life over the care of God, I could, end up a missionary in China. And so God looked at me and he said, well, Ray, to tell you the truth, I really don't think God wants you to represent him to the Chinese. And for some reason, that made sense to me. That I'd always kind of thought what would happen by doing that. But so somewhere in there, he said, why don't you just make a decision to work the rest of the steps and see what happens with you? So I said, yeah, I did. So that kind of hedged the third step a little bit, but we did the third step prayer, and we did that third step. And I said, I didn't really pray or anything like that. And he said, well, you need to pray. And I went, nah, I don't want to pray or anything. And he said, well, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. You need to do it. He said, God doesn't really need to hear your prayers. You need to hear you praying. And I went, So anyhow, I started doing that. And we did the third step prayer. And I said, what happens now? And they said, well, we'll do step 4. So that's how somehow I kind of got into was able to do the third step.
Okay.
I love that.
Well, a lot of people don't have a concept of a higher power when they start recovery. And so that was one of the things, and you answered it for us. We were wondering, you said a man named Doc told you it wasn't that God needed to hear your prayers, but that you needed to hear yourself praying.
Yeah, that was the thing. I needed to kind of change the way I thought. And by doing that, it's some of you was it act your way in the right thinking? Is that what you say? Or somehow you act your way in the right thinking, because I heard someone with sobriety one time say that, I can't think my way into right thinking. My thinking, I can't cure my thinking with my thinking. That's something like that, yeah. And so by doing that, I started to change the way that I thought about the world and being in it.
Thank you.
Well, I love the saying, it's hard to fall when you're on your knees. And I know a lot of people in recovery that hit their knees every night and, every morning, every night, say please in the morning and thank you at night. And you said you had trouble hitting your knees at first. And what did your sponsor tell you about that?
Listen, I'm in crossfire. These are going to be softball questions.
Sorry.
I'm just messing with you. No, I said, you need to get down on your knees, and when you wake up in the morning, get down on your knees, ask God to keep you sober. If you stay sober, you get down on your knees and you thank him at night. I went, well, I don't want to get down on my knees and do that. And he said, well, you had no problem getting down on your knees looking for cocaine in the carpet, did you? Had no in your knees, throwing up in a toilet. And I went, yeah. And I said, he said, you have a problem getting on your knees asking the creative intelligence underlying the material world and life as we know it to step you say sober? And I went, I guess not. So I started doing it, and I just did it pretty real quick. But the thing by doing that is I began to wedge this higher power into my life, just for a brief thing in the morning, just doing that, bam, and then, it was over. And at night, bam. But then as continued with the steps, I kept trying to keep this this higher power, good orderly direction in my life more than just in the morning and at night throughout the day. So you know, it worked.
And I'm just curious, is it still a part of do you still hit your knees regularly? It gets harder as we get older.
My knees.
I was going to say, we have to have help getting up.
Have help getting up, you know,
Thanks.
but I do a prayer and meditation, you know, I do that. And so, you know, but I'm still a great believer in prayer and meditation. Because, you
Great.
know, it says these are the steps we took. It doesn't say these are the steps we understood. These are the steps we enjoyed taking. These are the steps we figured out. It said these are the steps we took. So I took
The fake it till you
Great.
make it, yeah.
Yes. Could you talk to us about the importance of amends?
Ah, I could. Will I?
Well, well, you talked about a couple of them. Is there any that you could share with us, or
Here's the thing about the ninth step. You know, for me, I came in the program, kind of just kept going to these meetings and everything. Did the first step, did the second step, did the third step, got a sponsor, did 4, 5, kept coming to these meetings, did 6 and 7, did 8, did 9.
We know why you rushed through them, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but you went through them pretty quick.
Well, but the thing was, the great thing is after you finish the ninth step, you're even. You're even with your past. And for alcoholic, drug addict, that's a great place to be, just to be even with your past. And so, you know, somewhere in there, I was at a meeting. I had about 8 months sober, and I was at this meeting. And when I first came in the meeting, you know, I'd go to these meetings. I'd been about 4 or 5 meetings. I was sitting back on the back row, and SSO guy said, every meeting it's the same thing. They read how it works. Why do they do that? This old guy said, well, that's how it works. If you do that, you won't get drunk. And I went, oh, okay. So anyhow, I was at a meeting. I had about 8 months sober, and they called up this. They said, we're going to have Judy S. Come up and read how it works. So this woman walks up there, and all of a sudden she's reading how it works, and all of a sudden she's reading how it works, and all of a sudden she kind of stops and she looks at me and said, if you want what I have and are willing to go to any length to get it, give me a call. Now, nobody else remembers that. But I'm pretty sure that happened.
We want confirmation from Judy in a minute.
But so anyhow, we just kind of started talking and everything and hanging out. But then there was this thing about being a newcomer, you didn't date anybody for a year. So anyhow, I got with my sponsor, and we got with her and her sponsor, and we had this dinner, and we talked about it. Because I told my sponsor, I said, man, I think it's time I started dating. He said, man, how can you expect to have a relationship with a woman when you can't even keep a plant alive? And he had never been to my house, but these dead plants there. So anyhow, we got together, and they said, you know, we finally figured out that we could date after I finished my ninth step. So that week, you know, my truck was broke, so I borrowed my ex-wife's mother's truck. My mother-in-law, I got her a divorce settlement. And so I borrowed her truck, which was just this old farm truck. And I drove to Austin, made amends. I drove to Tyler, made amends. I drove to Oklahoma, made amends. Oklahoma City and Norman made amends. All that week, I just drove out and made amends. And then come that Friday, the last guy on the list, you know, I was there, and I called my sponsor. I said, this is the last guy on the list. He said, okay, you can date. So when I had the guy that made my amend call Judy up and say, he's done. Be ready at 8 o'clock. You know, I guess there was another incentive to do the amends. I guess it wasn't like I was showing some.
This is probably a good time to introduce Judy with you.
Well, it's one of those things, you know, just like I say, I didn't do that step for the spiritual awakening. I did it because of this woman here. There she is.
Hi, Judy.
Hey.
Hi. Let me make sure we're both.
Yeah,
in
there
there.
we go.
That's
Yeah.
perfect. Judy, you met Ray prior to the AA meeting, didn't you? In the book, I think it said you had met him before. And did you know you were going to marry him one day?
You know, when I was in high school, I started running away from home about 14, and the first place I would go would be to Austin or wherever Willie Nelson was having music. And I remember there was a thing in Abbott before the picnics. It was a Willie Nelson birthday or something, and all the usual suspects were there. And I remember when he came out on stage, and I looked at my high school runaway cohort next, and I said, one of these days I'm going to marry that Ray Wylie Hubbard. And after we married and I talked to her, she said, we got so sick of you saying that. Every place we'd go where he was playing, we all would say it in unison, one day I'm going to marry that Ray Wylie Hubbard. So yeah, it's weird because I met him back when I was working at Mother Blues, but
We didn't like each other.
I don't know. We did not like each other. We just, he was in the band. He came in the back door. I worked the door. So we never really interacted until he walked into AA.
And how long have y'all been married now?
32 years. And you know what? The last 2 weeks hadn't been that bad.
They're always.
I know. I understand what you're saying. I think that's one of my lines. Well, reading the book, one of the things I really did enjoy hearing the places like Poor David's Pub. I mean, I think I heard you there a few years ago, if you want to know the truth. And then Texas Tea House. Those places just bring back a lot of memories. But one of the things...
I don't know if I've told you that.
that was in the Judy. Didn't I see Texas Tea House in there?
Oh yeah, he's just saying we know a little bit about where you hung out.
Yeah. She's Jan's a preacher's daughter, so I'm just telling you she was a little wild.
No. Okay. No, I can almost remember the guy's name there who was singing Will something, but that's him. Okay. So let's get back. You all have a son named Lucas, and so love the photo of him,
and he's a musician too.
Yes, he is. He's my guitar player. He's been playing guitar with me, I guess, professionally for about 8 or 9 years. I guess he's 27 now. He started when he was about 16, and he earned the gig. It's not just like nepotism. He's a good player. A lot of the other musicians in my band have confirmed that it's not just he just got the gig because he's my kid.
Okay.
He's a great player.
Well, Judy, okay, can you confirm something for us? Can you tell us about when Lucas was born and when you all were talking about his name and ask about his middle name? What was Ray Wylie's suggestion?
I was watching a whole day of The Rifleman, Lucas McCain. And it was in Dallas in '93, and our air conditioning had gone out, and I was huge pregnant. I was burning up. And somehow I fell in love with Lucas McCain. So that when Ray came home that day, I said, we're naming our son, if it's a boy, because we didn't know, Lucas McCain after the Rifleman here. He said, well, only if we can name him after an outlaw for his middle name, and his middle name is Cole after Cole Younger, that ran with Jesse James. Is that right?
Originally,
the younger brothers. So.
Originally, I was trying to get his middle name to be 1521.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we were referencing.
1521. I'm like, that's
be great.
not a
1521 Hubbard. I know, but
tell us that aren't up on our Bible verses what verse that is.
It's a prodigal son deal where it says, "I've sinned against heaven and earth."
Yes.
Father,
but you're just setting him up to be a bad boy.
Well, I know that, but I just thought it would just be, just cool. Well, I lost that deal. So.
Yeah,
Cole works too.
All through school explaining to teachers. That really was his middle name, so he lost that battle.
Well, I'm so glad I didn't let my husband pick the names because he loves Lucas McCain and he still watches The Rifleman every weekend. Yes, we have to watch The Rifleman. So anyway, that's a great story about Lucas.
And Judy, who was your favorite Beatle? You had a story about.
Always Ringo. He was the funny one.
And I saw in the book, he had a quote that said, "I haven't read the book, but if Ray Wylie wrote it, I know it's good," or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we were very fortunate to meet Ringo and become friends, and be able to hang out with him before his show, and when he did Austin City Limits thing here, and there, and I have been very fortunate. He's played on my last record, and so he's just a great cat, man, and so feel very fortunate. And all of a sudden, it was just, in fact, we got one of his art pieces, and he signed it to Judy, to Ray and Judy. Just signed it to Judy, and peace and love, Ringo. So.
Well, we love that story, and we just can't tell you how much we appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, Judy and Ray, and your great stories.
And I'm amazed at how humble you both are, how it's just like our best friends, and you have this exciting life and all these famous people, and it's just really great. But if anybody wants to hear you speak, you're going to be in Fort Worth at the Jim Bradshaw Stars in Recovery Luncheon on April 15th at 1 o'clock, and you can still get tickets. I think Jason's going to flash up there how you can purchase tickets, and that luncheon is named after my father, Jim Bradshaw, who passed away 10 years ago. So Jan and I will be there. Looking forward to hearing you again in our Ray Wylie t-shirts.
We will be there and expect you to autograph our books for us. Yes, and then I think I saw that you're going to be performing at the Granada on April 9th.
Yes,
in Dallas.
We've like I say, this has been a really tough year on everybody, but the thing that we got into recovery on Zoom meetings, and that's been really really powerful to really get through this time. And but yeah, we're doing the Granada and doing some social distance gigs between coming up until hopefully everything levels off with everybody gets their vaccine and it. But yeah, we're doing the Granada. That's always a
right.
Well, we heard you speak in Dallas at the Nexus luncheon a few years ago, and I told the people at Recovery Resource, I said, "You've got to get him." You could hear a pin drop. I mean, it was one of their best lunches. So we are looking so forward to it, and we just appreciate y'all more than you know.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, thank you again for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks. So, Robin, what a great couple to interview.
They are the story. If y'all have not read the book, get it. There are hysterical short stories in it. It's an easy read. You can read it in one night.
I know. There's just no way I thought I'd be interviewing him 40 years ago. So this was really a thrill. But thank you again to Judy and Ray Wylie Hubbard. We also want to thank Taylor Stensrud of TLS Digital, Jason Stark and On Air Media, and of course, Recovery Resource Council. And be sure to follow us on our social medias and watch for our next book club and our next guest announcement.